Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Nutritional Revolution podcast. Today, we have for you guys Kilian Korth, and he lives and trains in Western Colorado, spending time traversing mountain ridges and desert canyons alike. He's an ultra runner and full-time coach focusing on the 200-mile distance. This weekend, he became the Moab 240 champion and Triple Crown winner, setting a new record after winning the 2025 Bigfoot 200 and Tahoe 200. We chatted with Kilian about some interesting nutrition and mindset strategies he uses, as well as achieving this monumental goal. Ultimately, he wants to evolve and strive toward longer and longer distances, eyeing some of the notable long trail FKTs in the United States and elsewhere, like the Colorado Trail, Pacific Crest Trail, and the Appalachian Trail. This is a fascinating episode. Learned some unique things that Kilian does that I have not heard other athletes doing, so enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Nutritional Revolution podcast. We have for you guys Kilian Korth. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me on. I'm excited to chat with you.
We are excited to geek out on all things nutrition, hydration, all the nuggets. But as our listeners know, we like to start our episodes off with our two truths and a lie. So I'm going to let you break those down for me.
Sure. I'm just going to make the three statements and then I'll just, I won't add anything else to them.
Perfect.
All right. On a trip to Ireland when I was 6, I nearly fell from the steps atop the cliffs of the Ski Lake Islands, which are known for being a filming location in the most recent Star Wars trilogy.
Cool. Okay.
I have a 10-inch scar on my back from where my parents accidentally ran me over with a tandem bicycle on July 4th when I was 11.
You're so specific. Okay.
And then when I recently got an allergy test, I was allergic to 55 out of 55 potential allergens they tested for.
Oh my God. Okay. Woo. Okay. If that is true, I'd be very fascinated to learn more about that. I hope your parents didn't run over you with a tandem bike. That sounds horrible. Man, these are very specific too. I kind of hope, for your own sake, I hope the allergy one is a lie. So I'm gonna go with that, but don't tell me the answer. And we will reveal it at the end of the episode for the listeners. All right, those are going to be some fun stories at the end of the episode. So hang on, folks, because I'm just as excited and curious as you are. Will you, Kilian, first kind of take us? Obviously, we're going to touch on Tahoe 200, then kind of relatively fast turnaround doing Bigfoot 200 and just hammering both of those. So before we get into all of that, do you want to share with us a little bit of your background and what got you interested in running and running very long distances?
Sure. So I was a swimmer all the way through college. I was a competitive swimmer basically from the age of 8 to 22.
Wow.
Swimming is a really, really hard sport. It's low impact, so you can train constantly. And so when I finished swimming, I still had the appetite of a swimmer. And so I kind of realized quickly, I was like, I need to do something else or I'm going to grow some pant sizes here very fast. So signed up for a marathon. This was 2018. And then ran that marathon. It was a road marathon, but it was in the mountains of Virginia. So I had a lot of climbing and then signed up for a 50 3 months after that and 100 3 months after that. So quickly dove into the ultra running side of things. And now that I'm a coach, I'm like, that was a really dumb way to do it. So it's too quickly, too fast of an entry into the long distances. Yeah. But, I've kind of had an endurance background my whole life. My family's been super active. So, when I was the summer I turned 7, the summer I turned 8, but we started when I was 7. My family and I, my parents and my brother and I bicycled from Fort Collins to Seattle.
Wow.
46 days on bikes, carrying all of our own stuff. So I don't think my parents were like, we're going to create great endurance athletes, but I see a direct continuation from that to what I'm interested in now. Early on in my ultra running career, I kind of knew that I would be focusing on the longer distances. Obviously 100 miles is a long ways, but you start doubling it and tripling it and you're talking, 200, 300 miles, multiple days dealing with sleep and stuff. And so I kind of knew, I'm not the fastest, I'm never going to be an elite marathoner or doing these runnable hundreds in 14 hours, anything like that.
Mm.
But I knew that I had, the willpower to keep moving when things would get
Mm.
really hard. And so that sort of drew me towards the longer distances. And so for the past, this is my 4th year focusing on the 200-mile distances. And I sort of see myself getting into longer trail FKTs, so fastest known time attempts, things like that. But yeah, the multi-day events are certainly where kind of my focus is and where my heart lies for the time being.
That's amazing. Where does that mental like willpower to continue on and keep pushing through 100 miles come from? Or 200 miles?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is probably, I think part of it's just innate. Like
Yeah.
when I was 3 years old and I was in swim lessons, uh, we got these like patches for how far you swim. So like 200 meters, 500 meters, that sort of thing. And the older kids, like 12-year-olds, 10-year-olds, were getting the 1,000-meter patch. And so when I
Mm.
was 3, I was like, I'm going to do that. And so it took me 2 hours or something, but I swam 1,000 meters when I was 3 years old. And so,
Oh my gosh.
it's like, I think there's something innate where I was just like, I knew that I had this ability to push through that kind of thing. And then obviously the experiences with bike trips as a kid definitely, fostered that even further. And then the discipline required to be a collegiate swimmer and to go through high school. In high school, I was swimming 9 times a week in practice. And so I would wake up at
Wow.
3:30 in the morning and I would eat breakfast and I would sleep for 40 minutes on the way to swim practice, swim for 2 hours, go to school, swim for 2 hours after school. And so like the discipline needed to train for these things was just a part of my life, basically from, the time that I can remember to now. So, yeah, I think a mixture of, genetics, lucky with the kind of innate ability to do that. And then just, continuing to foster it as I've grown older.
Yeah. Do you feel like the collegiate sports setting helped from like a nutrition pre and post fueling prep for what you're doing now?
No.
I feel
Yeah,
like it's hit
no.
and miss with
Yeah,
our guests.
I feel like when I was in college that I ate anything and everything and didn't notice any difference in how it affected me. So I was like
Yeah.
literally eating, heaping bowls of ice cream from my dining hall every single day. And
Yeah.
I'm never gaining weight and I'm not waking up feeling like garbage.
Yeah.
But then, I think everybody has this experience, mid to late 20s, or most people do, where you just like things start to slow down a little bit. And then all of a sudden I'm dealing with chronic inflammation and,
Mm.
I'm like all of a sudden intolerant to gluten, like all of these things
Mm.
where
Mhm.
there's like big changes that have occurred in my diet over time. So
Mhm.
yeah, essentially nothing that I was doing in college has any bearing on the way that I think about food and nutrition
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, a big evolution. I think in endurance nutrition in general, even in the last 5 years, for 2 years, it's changed so much. But so okay, so let's start diving into your 2025 season, and we can jump maybe to the Tahoe 200, which was June, correct?
Yep.
And then you took on Bigfoot 200, which was just this. We're recording this in August, end of August, but that was just a couple weeks ago, right? A
Yeah,
week.
like August 11th or something like that.
Yeah. So with that, okay, so first let's talk about Tahoe 200. Let's back it up prep wise. What did or I should say, how did your nutrition change in maybe like the week or couple weeks leading up to something like Tahoe 200? Do you change your nutrition at all?
No, can I go back a little further to kind of
Yeah.
my evolution and like how I feel for these things over the years?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
that's that's sort of that'll get me to the answer to your question, really. So I was actually a vegetarian for a while,
Hmm.
and I think I quickly realized I was like, this is not optimal for recovery and that type of thing. I'm sure that you can do it, but I wasn't willing to put in the work to like get the
Mm.
amount of protein and that sort of thing. So I then changed, started incorporating meat back into my diet, probably in like 2020. And then,
Mhm.
when I was looking at getting into the 200s, the best guy at the time and one of my, the people I look up to in the sport, his name is Mike McKnight. He has a low carb diet. And so
Mm.
he was kind of one of the pioneers of that for endurance sports and talked about how it reduced inflammation and that sort of thing. So I was interested in trying that out. So in 2021, I basically went full ketogenic for a little while. So
Mm.
like no
Wow.
carbohydrates. totally focusing on burning fat. And then over time, and the nomenclature for these things changes, but
Mhm.
basically what I'm calling it now, and what other people in the sport, and I think probably outside of it too, are calling it, is like optimized fat metabolism, so OFM,
Mhm.
where I periodize my carbohydrates around large efforts, and on recovery days, I'm probably getting less than 30 grams of carbs. So it's like, but then on a day where I've got a big 6 hour run, I'm getting more than 500. So it's kind of all
Mhm.
over the place there. But really focusing on protein intake, I try to get a minimum of a gram per pound of body weight per day. So
Nice.
kind of moving forward with that, I've noticed much better recovery, especially from like lifting sessions and big
Yeah.
efforts running. And so with that sort of long-winded answer, in the lead up to Tahoe, my feeling has been really consistent basically from the start of this year.
Mhm.
It's I try to eat essentially only whole foods, so I'm not eating really anything processed, and it's a lot of fats, a lot of cheese, red meat, um, and a lot of protein. So eggs. I do a protein shake every day because it's like the only thing that I get that's sweet ever. So it's
Mm.
kind of nice to have like some
Yeah.
cocoa flavored, whey powder.
Yeah.
Um, and then around bigger efforts, I'll do fruit and that sort of thing for my carbohydrates. I will add
Yeah.
in rice or potatoes every now and then. I mentioned earlier that like I took a long enough break from gluten that like it's
Mhm.
no longer an option. The last time I had,
Yeah.
a pita, it was like I'd been poisoned. So that's like
Oh.
never going to happen again.
Yeah.
But in the lead up to Tahoe, like don't change anything from my daily routines. I'm not like carb loading or adding in
Mhm.
anything else. It's all, I like to keep things really consistent. So like I know exactly what's going to happen with my digestion overnight. I know,
Mhm.
when all everything will be taken care of so that I'm ready to run. Like
Yeah.
I don't like to mess with things too much. I will, like the morning of the race, I'm eating a much bigger breakfast than is normal. So I'm
Mhm.
typically I do a pound of ground beef, a half cup of rice, and some cheese and butter and stuff, and just kind of mix that all together. So I'm getting fat and
Wow.
carbohydrates and that sort of thing. So a little bit unconventional in that way, but yeah, really consistent is kind of my philosophy with the diet.
Wow. Okay. So I have so many questions on all
Yeah,
that.
sorry, that was a
Okay.
long-winded way of
Uh,
answering your question.
no, but that's really helpful and like yeah, awesome information. So, okay, first question, gluten. When you say you like felt awful, what are your symptoms when you get glutened, as I call it?
Yeah, so I was the last time I ate any gluten, I was in Greece, and I was like, "Screw it, I'm going to eat a pita."
Yeah.
I'm on vacation, and
Yeah.
I like my fingers swelled up, my feet swelled up, I
Oh,
had brain
yeah.
fog, like my joints felt all creaky and awful. Like I was
Yeah.
in going through this museum, this awesome museum that I would have
Mm.
loved to enjoy, but I was like having to read all of the information like multiple times to actually like
Oh, no.
understand it. So it
Yeah.
was like I don't even exaggerate really when I was like minorly poisoned. It was
Wow.
rough, and I think I never had that as a kid, so I think that's
Yeah.
just a result of taking multiple years away from it.
Yeah, yeah. The gluten thing is very interesting. I'm diagnosed celiac actually shortly after I got out of high school, and we have athletes who are celiac getting diagnosed much later in life. But I know the symptoms can be so all over the board. I had one client where like if her husband cut a piece of bread, gluten bread, and then she used the same knife, she would be like vomiting. Like
Oh
it was
gosh.
like, there's just so many different levels to it. But so I do think I think a lot of athletes actually, well, just people are misdiagnosed with celiac and they tell, they get told it's like IBS or something like that, and to find out because it can be certainly damaging to the intestinal lining. Okay, and then jumping back to the keto stuff, I'm so curious. This is very fascinating to me because this is kind of like opposite of what we hear a lot of our guests share and talk about. And so when you initially transitioned to keto, more ketogenic years back, how did your performance feel?
So I did it during my off season, so it's not
Okay.
like I was doing it during a really high volume training period,
Mhm.
which is definitely what I would recommend if that's what people are
Yeah.
interested in doing. So I didn't notice anything too much like while I was transitioning. People talk about like the keto flu, and I didn't
Hmm.
have much of that. With
Nice.
within about 2 weeks, I noticed the cool thing about being like fully ketogenic is that my energy level throughout the day was like perfectly level. No
Mm-hmm.
spikes, no lows, anything. And like I
Yeah.
didn't even I would say like my energy level right now is pretty level, but I still don't have it's not like a perfect straight line like it was, which that
Mm-hmm.
was really nice being fully keto. What I will say is like, at the top end of like speed workouts, that type of thing,
Mm.
is like I had much less pop. And
Yeah.
so when I was training, I probably waited too long to kind of explore adding in more carbohydrates again.
Mm-hmm.
But, I was kind of obsessed with this idea of like, oh, wow, I can just do all of these things fasted and my body's just going to like pick on my fat and deal with it. Like, so
Mm-hmm.
it sort of became an obsession, which ultimately wasn't, optimizing for performance at races or for these long
Mm.
runs or anything. But it was a good way to learn about how all of these energy systems are working when you're doing these things. And so it probably took about a year of experimenting with like super low carb to then start
Mm-hmm.
adding back in, the typical running foods like gels and
Mm-hmm.
fruit and other kinds of, low inflammatory options for carbs.
Yeah, awesome. And out of curiosity, did you do any fat max testing like before or after
No.
the? Okay, I'd be
Yeah.
curious if it meant that.
My propensity to actually like do the lab tests on myself in all of the ways is pretty low. I'm like, if it's because it's just mostly worked out for me when I've been
Yeah.
experimenting. So it's like
Mhm.
when it's been working, I just haven't been like, I want to go pay for this extra thing, to
Yeah.
learn things that I already feel like I've got a handle on.
Yeah, totally. I think there's a lot to be said for that. There are, I think, a smaller handful of athletes that are very attuned to listening to their body and the
Yeah.
responses and knowing how to manage those properly. Um, and that's really important. And when you can do that properly, I think you can really excel well because like you said, you know what's working for your body or not.
Yeah.
Um, so as we approach Tahoe 200 and kind of coming off of the ketogenic, but then incorporating some more periodization of like higher carb and lower carb days, does that mean like tapering into 200? Does that mean you're doing a higher fat, lower carb diet?
Yeah, typically, I mean, the periodization is follows just kind of like an intuitive structure. So when my
Hmm.
intensity gets lower, my carbohydrate intake gets lower too.
Hmm.
But I feel like I basically trained for Tahoe from March all the way through to the end of May. So
Yeah.
your body is so used to what's happening at that point
Yeah.
that like I'm not worried about showing up on race day being like, oh no, what if in the past 2 weeks of tapering, my body all of a sudden became like intolerant to, burning carbs and stuff like that. So it's just, I feel like you practice enough on the long runs that it just
Yeah.
all kind of, takes care of itself on race day, or it should if you've put in,
Hmm.
the amount of time and effort that I typically have.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, so touching a little bit more on this, because this is, I think, very fascinating to me, but I think also a lot of our listeners, because again, we don't have as many athletes on that are following a little bit more higher fat or focusing more on that. So, on a day-to-day training, if you've got a zone two easy run planned, does that mean are you doing any fueling at all during, or is it based off of duration? Are you going purely no carbs during something like that that's more aerobic?
Yeah. So my rule of thumb for myself, and typically what I tell the athletes I'm working with, depending on what their goals are, is that any
Hmm.
run over 2 hours feel like you're going to feel on race day.
Mm-hmm.
And then so if all I have is an hour and a half long zone one, zone two run that day, I'll
Hmm.
do that fasted. I'll feel fine. I will
Hmm.
eat essentially no carbs. The only carbs I'm going to get that day are from the milk in my protein shake.
Hmm.
And then but, you know, it's kind of rare that I have those days because like typically my zone one, zone two run will be scheduled with a lift. And so
Mm.
around lifting, I'll typically intake quite a bit of fruit so that I'm
Mm.
getting some carbs before and after my lift. And
Yeah.
so it's periodized both around the running and around the strength training. And so
Hmm.
I think that, you really, the goal with the optimized fat metabolism is obviously to, one, bonk proof yourself in a race so that if you're having stomach issues, you can't eat, your energy level will be lower than you want it to be, but it's not going to be like rock bottom,
Hmm.
as
Hmm.
if you were only burning carbs. But also is to keep your your muscle glycogen topped off as much as possible. And so like
Yeah.
with strength training, anything that's like ratcheting up the intensity, I want my muscle glycogen stores to never be dipping so low
Yeah.
that my body is wondering what to do about the extra 20% of energy that I'm going to be getting from carbs, even if I'm a super efficient fat burner getting 80% from fat.
Yeah.
So even at that like 80-20 ratio, which I don't even know that that's where I'm at, that's just kind of where someone really optimized for fat metabolism will be. I
Hmm.
am still attempting to keep that 20% of muscle glycogen like as topped off as I can.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's smart. And the intestinal receptors, too, from a carbohydrate absorption lens, I think are important there. I think there was a study, it was, I mean, probably 5 or more years ago now, where they were looking at like full ketogenic diets leading up to a race and then only using carbs during the race. And there was just a massive amount of GI
Yeah.
distress because the carbohydrate receptors weren't upregulated. So, well, first off, what time does Tahoe 200 start during the day? Is it a night start or a
No,
morning?
thankfully their morning starts. This is 9 a.m.
Okay. What are you doing for dinner the night before the race?
Um, I have the most boring, like meal plan of all time. I pretty much eat the same thing every day, which
Yeah.
is a pound of ground beef split into 4 burgers, and
Mm.
then some cream spinach that's essentially like an Alfredo sauce,
Hmm.
and like cheeseburgers. And so that's what I do before the race too.
Wow. This is like blowing my mind because this is totally opposite of like what all the literature says and like what a lot of the athletes have shared with us. So do you ever experience GI issues on race day? Like it seems like your gut's got to be very trained to tolerate that amount of fats.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say infrequently since I've transitioned to the OFM kind of model, like
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
infrequently. I used to have stomach issues a lot more than I
Wow.
do now. And I mean, that's not to say I'm immune. I think things can just happen on
Yeah.
the day that are totally, unknown variables that can cause
Hmm.
problems. But
Hmm.
I mean, like I mentioned earlier, my breakfast the morning of, I'm doing some carbohydrates, but I really notice that
Yeah.
if I take in carbohydrates at night, that I sleep a lot worse. So I just don't, I'm
Mm.
not messing with that, going into a night when ultimately I'm going to find it hard to sleep anyway. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm not going
Yeah.
to mess around with carbs when I know they'll affect my sleep.
Yeah. You would be a very fascinating athlete to have in a research study. Like I would like love that because yeah, just like yeah, so much literature stuff is like popping into my brain where it's like carbohydrates consumed in the 2 hours before bedtime will support sleep quality. It's like, but for you, it's totally opposite, right? And I wonder, yeah, is that because you've transitioned and trained your body more for a higher fat diet versus probably the participants in this study were not trained for a higher fat diet.
Yeah. I mean,
So
I also think that there's just enough biological variability that there's going to be people who are tolerating kind of everything across the spectrum.
yeah,
I think, I mean, I know other ultra runners who I would describe as like essentially garbage disposals, like they can
yeah,
eat literally anything all the time
yes.
and stomach whatever. And it's like, that is not me. It's never been me. So, I think the nutrition puzzle, especially for endurance sports, is just
Hmm.
so individualized. And
Yeah.
so like there's only a few things that I'd be willing to say where I'm like, I would universally recommend this to people. And I always tell this to my athletes, it's like, I'll qualify all of my statements with like, this is what I do. These are my
Yeah.
opinions, but there's just so little that I'd be willing to be like, everyone should be doing this. So,
Totally.
um,
Yeah.
just to,
Yeah.
just to qualify everything I'm saying here with that caveat for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I would, yeah, I'd back you in the sense that every piece of literature out there is based off of usually a small, like for the majority, a smaller sample size, and there's always outliers in that, and
Hmm.
um, yeah, and maybe it's like only 20-year-old males that are collegiate athletes that we're basing some information off of. So it is certainly important to test on oneself and know what works for you and
Yeah.
makes sense for you.
And
So
there's just,
yeah.
I don't think there's that much. There's more coming out, but there's just not that much that's been studied about ultra running specifically. And like,
Yes.
it's going to be so different for a 50 miler. It's going to be different for 100, and then it's going to be super different for 200. Like once you start going for multiple days. So it's like,
Yeah.
even within the sport itself, I don't think that even if we had like really good studies to support stuff, like I doubt that there would be these universal recommendations, because it's going to be so
Yeah.
different to fuel for a 100 miler that's going to take 14 hours versus a 100 miler that's going to take 30 hours versus a
Yes.
200 that's taking 2 days. It's like kind of all over the map. And that's what's fun about it, is because you kind of just have to accept the unknown. Whereas like
Yeah.
with Ironmans and marathons and stuff like that, I do feel like we kind of have it down. But with ultra running, there's so many different approaches that people are successful with, and there's a lot of wiggle room to experiment,
Mm-hmm.
which is, that's what I enjoy as both a coach and an athlete.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is a fascinating space for sure right now. Okay, so as we get into Tahoe 200, so we talked about your night before morning breakfast. How much time are you giving yourself to digest that breakfast?
2.5 hours.
Okay. And then anything coming in between that breakfast and the start line?
Yeah, typically in the hour before the race, I use precision gels,
Hmm.
and I'll like slowly sip on one of the 90-gram
Mm,
carb precision gels in the hour before
yeah,
the race.
nice. And then you start off the race. What are you starting with? How are you transporting your nutrition?
Yeah,
What
so
does that look
it's
like?
all in my running vest, and I'll use a mixture of gels and liquid calories. This has also been a huge evolution for me this year, where I used
Mm,
to think like, oh, for these long races, I want to focus on real food, but that is
hmm.
not the approach that has been successful this year. So I would say 90 to 95% of my calories are coming from gels and liquid
Hmm.
calories, with
Hmm.
a tiny portion coming from like some buttery, cheesy rice that I'll get from my crew when I see them. And it is nice every now and then to just like put something solid in your stomach. I think it does
Hmm.
make you feel a little better. But
Hmm.
like during the run, so for Tahoe specifically, I was probably getting between 70 and 80 grams of carbs an hour for about the
Nice.
first 100 miles. And then, typically as your intensity ratchets down, I'll go down to about 60 grams of carbs an hour.
Hmm.
And that's once we get to Bigfoot, that was a little bit mirrored there as well, even though I was actually probably a little higher for the first 100 miles of Bigfoot. But yeah, for Tahoe,
Mm.
um, 60 or 70 to 80 for the first 100 miles. During the day, every 3 hours, I would take 100 milligrams of caffeine from a gel. And then during the night, every other hour, I would take 100 milligrams of caffeine, switch back during the next day.
Wow.
And then during the last night, so like the last 12 hours or so of a race, I just am just going all in on caffeine, like whatever I need, energy drinks, that sort of thing. It's just like, uh, I'm trying to keep my brain alive as much as possible. And so I estimated, and I think it's pretty close to accurate, that for Tahoe over the course of 52 hours, I had 3,100 milligrams of caffeine.
Oh
Um,
my God.
yeah, a crazy amount.
Insane. Yeah.
But I mean, almost all of that was focused in the last 12 to 20 hours. Like probably
Wow.
2,000, 1,500 to 2,000 milligrams of it in the last chunk of the race. So you're just like
Wow.
trying to get yourself across the finish line as much as possible.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. And with the caffeine, is that a caffeinated precision or?
Yeah. So almost all from caffeinated precision.
Mhm.
I've done, during Tahoe, I had 3 Celsius energy drinks, which are like 200
Oh,
milligram
wow.
doses. But
Yeah.
that's a little bit riskier because it's just like it does mess up your stomach. And like every time I've
Yeah.
chugged one of those, for like 30 seconds, I'm like, I'm going to vomit or die,
Yeah.
and then it like all kind of calms down. But
Settles.
sometimes it's worth it. And I'll save it towards the end of a race because you just need like a big dose now. Like I'm getting,
Yeah.
I'm only sleeping 5 minutes during these things. And so
Wow.
like before I took my 5 minute dirt nap for both Tahoe and Bigfoot, I took a 200 milligram dose of caffeine from a Celsius and then slept for 5 minutes and woke up feeling, as refreshed as you could expect.
Oh my gosh. That's wild. Is it literally 5 minutes? Like you set a
Yeah. I
timer
mean,
and that's all you
I
do?
think it's actually 6 minutes is what my brother has set the timer for, so that it gives me a
Wow.
minute to fall asleep. But yeah, roughly 5 minutes.
Wow. And how do you determine when you're going to do that? Your 5 minute
Basically,
dirt nap.
once the brain, it's like once the brain's not working anymore, like
Mm.
I'm like swerving and I like can't, my foot's just like not going where I expect my foot to go, and I can't
Yeah.
stay awake. Like often I'll literally like have my eyes shut on the trail for 20 seconds
Mm,
or something, and I'll be like, okay,
wow.
well, this is the moment. And
Yeah.
I don't plan my sleep, so I do wait until I know that I can fall asleep. And it worked the best in
Yeah.
Tahoe. But I mean, I hit the dirt and I was in the netherworld for 5 minutes. Like I have
Wow.
blackness, like I had dreams. It was crazy. And then I woke up and, it's kind of like, your computer's freaking out or something and it's just pressing the on off switch. It's like that's what's happening in the brain and it just needs a quick reset.
Wow, that is amazing. And so you talked about carb intake per hour. What about fluids and sodium? How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, so I have never really had issues with my electrolyte balance, and so I haven't been, the most mindful out of, I have athletes that I work with who we have worked together to come up with like a more specific plan than even what I have.
Hmm.
But typically, I am getting, you know, probably point 0.8. My flasks are point 0.8 liters, and I'm probably getting close to point 0.8, so 800 milliliters of fluid with 500 milligrams of sodium an hour, something like
Mm-hmm.
that. Um,
Wow.
Increase during the day, decrease during the night for
Hmm.
heat and it getting colder, but that's probably the
Yeah.
average.
Nice. Do you find that you're able to tolerate less fluid towards the like back half of the race, or are you trying to
Not
keep it the same?
necessarily.
Okay.
I will say, like, typically as your intensity drops off and you just everything slows down, you
Yeah.
need less fluid. I often look forward to the night when I just don't have to take care of myself quite as specifically, because you're just
Hmm.
drinking a lot less when it's
Yeah.
30 degrees cooler. But no, I think the the fluid has never really hasn't often been an issue with me. I've had a couple runs where I've over salted and that can cause some pretty significant GI distress. But I think that
Hmm.
in my entire, since 2018, that's happened 2 times. So I've just
Yeah.
made that mistake. But for the most part, the fluid doesn't give me any issues.
Wow, that's great. And have you done any like sweat testing to determine your needs, or is it more
No,
based
I
off feel?
haven't. Yeah, like
Yeah.
I said, it's like if I haven't had problems. I'm working with Precision now, so I'm
Yep.
affiliated with them, and I think they would support me getting a sweat test, so they they
Yeah.
might foot the bill for that. In which
Yeah.
case, I'd probably go for it, but it just hasn't been an issue, so it hasn't been something
Hmm.
that I've been like, oh, I need to address this.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Okay. So we talked about fueling hydration. What are once you cross that finish line of Tahoe 200, what are you taking in any recovery? You have zero appetite. What is that like?
Honestly, part of the relief of finishing these things is just like, okay, I don't have to take care of myself for like you're force feeding yourself for the last day of a race. Typically it's not like anything
Yeah.
sounds appetizing, but that being said, it's like you need to eat, so I'll have a protein shake. Typically I can manage to get that down in the first
Hmm.
hour after finishing, and then basically the only thing I'm focusing on in the week following is like protein. Like I want my muscles to rebuild. Let's like
Yeah.
give the body the ability to do this. And so I mean, following Tahoe had my typical kind of burgers type of meals. I had the day after I went to breakfast. 2 hours later, went out to lunch. Like so, the night you finish, typically your appetite is kind of nothing. It's like
Yeah.
everything just feels super off. But then the days following, I have just a week where I'm like, whatever I feel like eating within the
Hmm.
parameters of my diet. But
Yeah.
however much I feel like eating, like it's gonna happen. I'm just gonna
Yeah.
eat. And so like getting in as many calories as possible almost I think is pretty good. And then just focusing on protein. I read a study, there was only an N of 2, so it was like 2 athletes in the Wasatch 100, but their
Yeah.
metabolism was ramped up for the next
I,
five
s-
days. Like
I
it
saw
was this
that.
very slow drop in like
Yeah.
how many calories they're burning. So I think it's really important post race to be mindful, like
Yeah.
let's refuel, let's get the building blocks in place so that you can actually rebuild from this, especially since I had the 2 other races after Tahoe. So
Yes.
with the race series is even more important. After Moab, I may just be like whatever, but after Tahoe, with Bigfoot looming
Yeah.
fairly in less than 2 months, I was like, we need to, this is non-negotiable.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, hammer home the recovery. On that note, do you ever utilize any supplements like omega 3s or performance like
Yeah.
creatine or beta alanine or
So
any of those?
creatine every day.
Hmm.
Um, omega-3, vitamin D every day. I take a supplement called Tungat Ali, which is like a
Oh
male
yeah.
hormone support. It
Hmm.
was first studied by the NBA. And then recently I started, so I am also affiliated with Currents, but I started taking them before I was affiliated with them. But it's like a
Hmm.
black currant extract from New Zealand.
Oh, nice.
And
Yep.
I have noticed significant benefits. So that's, that's kind of my routine. I also take a glucosamine supplement. My
Hmm.
dog, it has arthritis. So I was like,
Yeah.
maybe this would help me too.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
I take that. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to know when you're doing like so much for recovery. It's hard to be like, this thing definitely works. I'm willing to
Yeah.
say that about Currens because I noticed on long runs, if I didn't have it, I would be more fatigued and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm willing to say that. I'm willing to say it about the Tungat Ali with
Hmm.
the hormone support. There's some like very obvious indicators that your
Hmm.
testosterone is low or where it needs to
Hmm.
be. So those are two that I'm willing to be uh, you know positive about in terms of
Yeah.
what I think works. But and then creatine has been studied enough that I just don't question it. But it's like
Yeah.
so I don't have an Andrew Huberman level supplement routine, but I feel like
Yeah.
I'm at an adequate place.
Nice. Did you notice any water retention when you started creatine?
No, no, not
Were
really.
you worried about that at all?
No.
No. Okay. I I think that's helpful for our listeners to hear because I do think certainly in cycling and in running, I think there's a lot of fear of this like water um weight to power ratio
Yeah.
or all of that. And yeah, I
I
think
think
it's
some of that gets overblown, like trying to
yeah.
hit a race weight. Like I've been the heaviest I've been going into races this year, and I felt the best I've ever felt. So I think that people can get sucked into like, oh, I need to be, 150 pounds or whatever. But it's
Hmm.
like, be the weight that you feel the best at. Like that's what's
Yeah.
most important. I'm definitely thicker and heavier than most runners, but it's working for me. So
Yeah, I think there's so much to be said for that. And I think it's really important that athletes share that too. And then in the opposite side of the spectrum too, I know a lot of athletes are starting to open up about whether they're like getting injured or yeah, just immune system and hormones are
yeah,
tanking and yeah, you just don't feel super great. And so yeah, taking care of your body, obviously it pays off, as we can see here based off of your performances. So with that turnaround time, Tahoe 200 to Bigfoot 200, what kind of things are you mentioned the Currens, the other supplements. What other things are you trying to do to really prioritize recovery and supporting performance and prep for Bigfoot?
yeah.
Whether that's Normatec boots, like what does that look
Yeah,
like for
so I
you?
I do have some compression boots that I typically use every day. I have a sauna that I am typically in every day.
Nice.
The sauna after races, I feel like it's almost like magic. Like I get into the
Yeah.
sauna limping around, and then I get out of the
Yeah.
sauna able to walk. Like I will proselytize about that for forever. It seems too good to be true in some ways.
Yeah.
But I mean, I prioritizing rest. It's like
Hmm.
after Tahoe. So most people who run Tahoe get some kind of breathing issues because of the pollen,
Mm.
and there's just so much of it. Like it's just an upper respiratory obstructive issue, but it
Yeah.
sucks big time. So like I had 70 miles, 20 hours of like oxygen depletion going on, and so it
Mm.
took me a really long time after Tahoe just to feel normal.
Yeah.
I will admit to having a moment of panic the week after where I was like, oh my God, I have another race in 7 weeks. What have I done? Like, this is totally insane. But once the breathing came back to normal and all of that, it was, it was my mentality shifted to like, okay, we can do this. Like, I know what's going on.
Nice.
Um,
Yeah.
but I mean, focusing on rest is the main thing. It's like prioritizing sleep, prioritizing doing all the little recovery things that you can do, starting up mobility once it feels like you can tug on your muscles a little bit, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
I firmly believe that motion is lotion. So like going on walks, like simple low impact cardio like that before you got back
Hmm.
into running. And then with the race series, it's like I just took I feel like I've had to accept like I'm not going to show up to Bigfoot or Moab in the same
Hmm.
shape that I showed up to Tahoe. Like that's just like
Hmm.
I think is just a fact. It's not
Yeah.
arguable. Um,
Hmm.
and so I was thinking, like in the 7 weeks between the races, I'm like, if I can get in training, that would be great. But
Hmm.
ultimately, I'm going to optimize for showing up on race day as healthy as possible. So kind of having the mindset that like the rest of my year after Tahoe is about maintenance. Like we are attempting
Hmm.
to hold on to as much of the fitness and the strength that I built up before Tahoe as possible. So
Nice.
kind of just shifting your mindset from this like hammer training to,
Hmm.
okay, we're going to take care of myself as the number one priority, and training is going to
Yeah.
be the secondary priority.
Yeah. I love that. And so based off of that kind of mindset shift a little bit and going into Tahoe 200, what does anything change going into Bigfoot 200 from a nutrition lens in that
No.
week?
Yeah.
No.
Like I
Okay.
said,
Keeps the
everything
same.
super consistent. Yeah. It's like, I feel like for me, I know what works now. And it's just like,
Hmm.
I'm happy eating the same things every day. I'm like really diligent about my diet, so it's just, I'm not adding in new things that could potentially be inflammatory. It's like
Yeah.
with endurance sports, especially after one of those races, you've got so much inflammation. It's like, I don't want to do anything to,
Yeah.
press the button that could increase that at all.
Yeah. Yeah. That's smart. Okay. So then at Bigfoot 200, same dinner the night before, same breakfast, anything different from a fueling lens during the race at all based off of slightly different, whether temperature, terrain,
Yeah.
anything?
A little bit. Excuse me, I was feeling really good the first 100 miles. I actually felt pretty good most of the race, but
Nice.
I pretty much averaged 90 grams of carbs for
Wow.
the first 100 miles. So I upped the carbohydrate intake a little bit.
Hmm.
I started having, I wouldn't call it stomach problems. Like I wasn't having to stop and pull over on the trail a whole bunch, but
Hmm.
stomach distress, like, ugh,
Mm.
kind of
Yeah.
feelings. And so I bumped that back down to about 60 for the
Hmm.
second half. So sort of a similar mirror image of Tahoe, but
Hmm.
with a little bit more aggressive carbohydrate intake on the front end. But other
Hmm.
than that, very similar. I mean, like both of these races, it's just seemed to work, and I'm just not trying to mess with the formula when I feel like
Yeah.
I've got this like momentum and it's working. And I mean, I said I'm going to show up to Bigfoot in worse shape than showing up to Tahoe. And I do think that's probably true from a physiological perspective, but Bigfoot was the best race of my career. So I
Oh,
can't,
nice. Yeah.
everything went swimmingly.
Yeah. Amazing. So no, yeah, no muscle cramping, just a little bit of that GI, which you
Yeah.
managed. And then, yeah, amazing. How did were there hotter sections where you had to prioritize cooling? And if so, how did you do that?
No, I got really lucky with temps. So like my
Yeah.
high was probably 75 during the day.
Oh,
So
nice.
pretty
Yeah.
easy. It's like I feel immune to heat from a mental perspective anyway, because I sauna so much, and my sauna gets
Yeah.
up to 230. So it's like if
Oh
I
my
spend
gosh.
20 minutes in there at 230 and it's humid and I get out and I'm dying, it's like 100 degrees feels whatever. But yeah, I
Yeah.
got lucky with temps. I finished on Sunday morning, and then later on Sunday when I had some friends finishing, it was like 97. So
Oh,
I missed all of
yeah.
the heat. And so yeah, no, I never focused on cooling or anything. I was pretty comfortable the whole
That's
time.
great. And similar caffeine consumption too during
Yep.
Bigfoot? Wow. Amazing. Okay, touching on the sauna, since we've talked about it a little bit, do you do a specific heat training protocol or blocks, or is it something you just do all the time?
Yeah. So typically, I mean, almost every day, I'll say like probably an average of 5 times a week, just given
Hmm.
that I'm like out and about, some of the
Hmm.
time. But I have been spending 20 minutes in there, starting around 210, ending around 230,
Wow.
with a couple steams
Hmm.
in intermittently, and then I drink about a liter of fluid and 1,000 milligrams of sodium while I'm in there.
Yeah.
And so that has worked for Moab because it can be a really hot race. I've lowered the temperature a little bit, so starting more around like 190, getting up to 210, and
Hmm.
increased my time. So I'm up to
Oh, yeah.
25 minutes now, and
Wow.
so kind of working there. I've gone a little too aggressive with the sauna in the past, where like I was like, I'm going to train myself to be able to process tons of fluid, and I spent an hour in there, and then was like my skin like started to like shrivel up.
Oh no.
So there's like a balance, and you don't want
Yeah.
to dehydrate yourself and whatnot. Especially since I'm using it mostly for recovery and then that passive heat
Yeah.
training. But I mean, I
Yeah.
will say after 20 minutes at 230 or 25 minutes with a little lower, it's like I get out and my heart rate is at my lactate threshold. Like I'm at
Yeah.
160
Yeah.
sitting around doing nothing. So, it's been, I think, really beneficial just in terms of like the mind being like totally immune to heat. It does never bothers me. It's never a
Yeah.
question. I like hope races are hot because I know it'll affect other people more. And
Yeah.
then I'm sure physiologically, your sweat response and all of that's getting trained. And then, like I said, after races, there's nothing better to just like loosen everything up when, it's not
Yeah.
like I want to stretch and tug on things. So it's almost a little bit of a like miniature cardio with some mobility
Mhm.
added on because you just break
Yeah.
everything down.
Yeah. That's great. I love that. And with the fluid consumption while you're in there, is that like iced down or is that
Yeah.
kind of warming up to the temperature? Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Typically cold. I mean, I,
Yeah.
I use it as like when I get 10 minutes in and I'll take like 5 sips and then
Yeah.
I count my breaths for 3 minutes and then I take 5 more sips and I like use it as like milestones because
Oh,
sometimes the
nice.
last 10 minutes is just like miserable. I'm like,
Yeah.
God, I want to leave.
Yeah, yeah. I started bringing in like a hard copy book into the sauna because you can't like bring a phone or anything in there because
Yeah.
and I mean, it ruins the binding for sure, and the book
Yeah.
starts to fall apart by the time you get to the end of the book. But for some reason, it totally helps like distract my brain. So I'm sitting
Yeah.
in there. We have like a shared sauna at our gym, and I'll go in there, and people will come in and they'll be like, "Oh my God, your breathing is so normal. Like, how are you doing that?" It's the book is just like so distracting, and
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know what, but yeah, sitting in there without a book, I think I would be having to count my breaths too. That
Yeah.
would
I
be
mean,
rough.
I'll typically like switch off between kind of trying to meditate my way through it or the floor of my sauna when my level is 230, the floor of my
Yeah.
sauna is like 80. So I can keep my phone on the ground
Whoa.
and
Oh,
listen
okay.
listen to a podcast or something. So I'll
Nice.
do that too for a little bit of
Yeah.
the mental to ease the mental anguish.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Okay. Kind of moving on to kind of outside of race stuff, but do you do any regular blood testing to check on lab markers or anything like that throughout your
No, I
season?
don't. Yeah.
No.
I saw that in the email he sent me and I was like, yeah, I have nothing to add to that, unfortunately.
It's all good. It's all good. I mean, again, you're very good at listening to your body, it sounds like. So there's not like a need to follow up and be like, what's going on?
I will say that one time I had a race where I ended up in the ICU afterwards because I had some
Oh,
serious
shoot.
breathing issues. This was back
Oh,
in
no.
2023. But so I got some blood tests then. And
Yeah.
it was pretty interesting. I have a friend who's an ER doctor and I showed her all the results and she's like, man, like at the end of these things, like you're basically dying. Like you're like in early, like your kidneys are working really hard. So like the indicators are like, if this was just normal, you'd be like, someone might be entering kidney failure,
Yeah.
like there's like measures of cardiac tissue breakdown, which are like 16 times higher than
Oh my
normal. And
gosh.
so I was having other health problems, but I'm sure that, at the end of these races, if you were to just look inside, that the markers would all be like emergency level problems, but obviously
Yes.
with a known cause.
Yeah. Yeah. That is fascinating. I have a friend who's a PA in a cardiology clinic as well. And I remember I was telling her about, I think it was creatinine levels in one of my athletes. And she's like, oh my God, that's like levels where we would be treating somebody. Like that's like wild. But yeah, it is an interesting thing that we put our bodies through. I have not run 200 miles, but but in endurance sports in general. Okay, so we talked about supplements, we talked about recovery. Any strategies, or I should say, maybe struggles that you experienced with your nutrition journey that I mean, over the years that you feel like you've had to tweak?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, like I said when I started my ultra running career, I was a vegetarian for moral reasons, and I still would agree with all of those arguments I would have made back then, which is why I try to get my meat from local farms where,
Yeah.
I know the cows are being treated nicely until their
Hmm.
one bad day at the end.
Yeah.
But all of that aside, I think the big lessons for me is like, and I think that this has been, increasingly talked about is just like I think endurance athletes are probably totally underutilizing protein in a lot of ways. Like I think they're not taking in enough. I know a few different ultra runners who've started working with a nutritionist, and the nutritionist has been like, "Hey, we're going to
Yeah.
address this problem right away." And I mean, if you look at ultra runners who have the longest careers, Jeff
Hmm.
Browning being the example that comes to mind. He's very much focused on the protein intake. So I think that's huge.
Yeah.
Um, I think that uh, you know, working with a lot of athletes, it's like you need to encourage them to experiment as much as possible in training. Like
Hmm.
I think that people, it's hard to encourage that so much because running stuff is expensive. Gels are expensive,
Hmm.
all these things. But if you want, especially if someone's trying to be competitive, it's like, listen, like
Yeah.
this is what has to happen. You can't show up on race day and think I'm going to fuel with 40 grams of carbs an hour and run a really fast 100 or run an effective 200. Like that's just not going to work.
Yeah.
So I think you know the experimentation side of things, like be willing to try new things.
Hmm.
Um, I would say, and with some qualifications, that people should embrace caffeine more. It's
Hmm.
a legal performance enhancing drug. Like let's
Hmm.
it's doing a lot of good for you. There's no reason to run 100 and be tired during the night. There's no reason to run a 200 and be tired during the first night. Like it's
Hmm.
just we can solve that problem. We have the ability to do it. Um,
Hmm.
and I think just thinking of fueling, it's sort of I just think of fueling in the same vein as I think of shoes or packs or the training itself. It's like all of these are tools.
Yeah.
You're assembling a toolkit to be successful, and so trying to be as objective as you can be about what works. Like
Hmm.
one of the issues I have with talking about nutrition in sometimes is that it can get kind of ideological,
Hmm.
and it's like I try to avoid that at all costs. It's like ultra running. To be successful is just like an inherently practical project. You can't base it on beliefs. It has to be based on
Hmm.
like what has actually worked for you. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that actually covered what you asked, but that's
No, that's perfect.
that.
I think you like bring up a great point, and that is exactly why we do this podcast, because we have kind of a 50-50 balance, right? As we have on athletes and we want to know what they're doing in real life, what is actually working, and then we'll have researchers on that will present on what's been done in a lab or a
Hmm.
controlled setting with a small sample size and what did we find. And yeah, we want to educate our listeners so they can take those two sides of it and apply it how they wish, and what makes the most sense for them. And I think you're a fantastic guest to have on, because like I said, you're one of the first ones who's really been um kind of more outspoken about doing a little bit higher fat throughout your lead up, and yeah, like really strong specific periodization of carbohydrates. So I think that's really really fascinating and good for our listeners to hear that there's another side out there that they could experiment with that maybe they haven't so far. So I love that.
Definitely.
um
I mean,
yeah, tell us. Yeah, go ahead.
if people are dealing with chronic inflammation, which is part
Yeah.
of what urged me to make the switch, I think that is bad in so many ways. It's bad for your
Hmm.
longevity as a human being. It's bad for your brain. It's
Hmm.
bad for obviously it's going to be bad for recovery and that sort of thing. So like if that is an issue, it's like why
Hmm.
not go outside the bounds of what is thought to be kind of normal or recommended by such and such authority.
Yeah, yeah. And with kind of on the chronic inflammation note, just for our listeners' sake, what kind of things were you noticing, or lab tests that showed that you were having chronic inflammation?
So it's mostly just, again, I'm not I don't have the lab tests to back any of this up. So, but it
Mm.
was just you know ankles being sore, knees being sore, like all
Mm.
of these types of
Hmm.
things, like not recovering how I expected.
Yeah.
Being at work and like bending down to pick something up and kind of being in a lunge position and noticing that
Mm.
at the bottom of the lunges, like when my knee bottoms out, I would like experience kind of severe pain sometimes. And I'm like,
Yeah.
why is this? Like I'm doing all of the things that I should be doing to be strong and ready for this. So
Hmm.
and then just paying a little more attention to like, okay, so I ate a steak and some potatoes the night before a long run, and I felt really good the next day, and then I
Hmm.
ate something similar afterwards and I recovered really fast. Or
Yeah.
I had pasta and mac and cheese with some protein and some meat, but I noticed that I'm recovering much slower. So kind of just over time, listening to those signs and just like being
Yeah.
mindful of kind of how you feel, I think is important. I feel like sometimes I'll ask my athletes I work with, I'll be like, what's the meal that makes you feel the best? And
Mm-hmm.
if you don't have an answer to that, I think you're not paying enough attention to how it's
Yeah.
affecting you.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I love that. So, on the coaching side of things, tell us a little bit about your coaching business. Are you taking on any athletes? What is
Sure.
that?
So
Yeah.
I work with Everyday Ultra. Joe
Mhm.
Corcione runs Everyday Ultra, and I started with them earlier this year. And unfortunately, I did just close myself off to new athletes since
Gotcha.
with winning the 2 races and joining Everyday Ultra. And yeah, the last few months have been kind of a whirlwind for me. But I am a
Yeah.
full time coach now for the first time in my life, so that's pretty
Wow.
cool. Um,
Nice.
but yeah, I mean, I'm working with a variety of people who are running anywhere from like a 50K up to some other people who are doing the Triple Crown along with me. I
Wow.
do have, two athletes currently in the Triple Crown, both like fighting to podium for it. One man, one woman. So it would be cool
Wow.
if I can if I won the Triple Crown and then a couple other athletes that I'm working with were on the podium. That would be pretty
Amazing.
fun. But yeah, I mean, I try to I think that good coaches are people who have had struggles in the sport. Like I think if you think of team sports, it's not often the best football player, best soccer player that's making the best coach. It's someone who like had to work at it, and so I feel
Yeah.
like that's kind of what makes me a good coach is that I've especially for the 200s, it's like I have failed constantly for the past 3 years before having any taste of success. So it's like
Mm.
I've just learned a lot along the way, and being able to
Mhm.
pass that on to people is very rewarding.
Yeah, yeah, the life experience and the navigating and adapting is an amazing skill set. Okay, so I want to let's see. I'll do some final lesson learned. We have a couple audience questions, which we may have answered a couple. But was there any big takeaways from doing the 200s back to back?
Whew, yeah, it's hard. That's the biggest takeaway. I don't think at the beginning of the year I fully realized what I was getting myself into. I was like, because I'd done 200s before, and so I kind of knew, what to expect from one race. But then
Hmm.
immediately after Tahoe, I was like, oh my god, like, okay, like this is a different thing because it's a race series. So yeah,
Hmm.
I mean, I think just if you're going to do a race series like this, you just have to accept the rest of your year after race number one is maintenance. Like
Hmm.
I don't think I think it's totally delusional to think you could show up to the last race being like as optimized as you were for race number one. So I think
Yeah.
accepting that is important, and then just I've talked to my athletes who are doing the Triple Crown about the same thing. It's like safety first perspective. Show up on race day
Hmm.
as healthy as possible. Like once you've got the mindset and the ability to push yourself through these things, like your fitness is secondary to the fact that you want everything to be solid showing up. And
Hmm.
so it's like that's I think the lesson I would take forward if I was like helping someone try to attempt this. Is just like it is about optimizing for race one and then attempting to halt the slide as much as
Hmm.
humanly possible for the rest of the summer. It's not about
Yeah.
trying to make gains necessarily.
That's great. Do see a lot of athletes where they, granted, it's usually smaller races leading up to like an A race at the end of the summer. Do you have the same thoughts around that if they structure their racing that way?
So personally, I'm really not a fan of tune-up races. Like for me,
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
enter a race and think of it as a training run. Like that's just not the
Mm-hmm.
way I'm gonna. It's like not the way my competitive brain works. It's just not going to
Yes.
happen for me. So I
Hmm.
don't do tune-up races. But that being said, that is not a common strategy. Like plenty of people do. And I think if you're training for, if you're, it's so different than a 200 is so different from even 100. Like
Yeah.
people can have successful hundreds a month apart from each other, and I
Hmm.
think can pretty much perform equivalently in both. It's maybe not equivalently, but close to. But you're
Yeah.
not suffering the sleep debt. You're not taking the
Mm.
next week to just get yourself waking up and not feeling tired, which is all you're
Yeah.
doing the first week after a 200 is just attempting to wake up in the morning and be like, oh, I feel kind of normal. And so it is really different. So I think if you have shorter goals that take about a day, you can
Hmm.
definitely make tune up races a thing.
Hmm.
And I know plenty of really fast, solid athletes that'll use a 50K as a jumping off point for 100 about 3-4 weeks out. You
Yeah.
want to give yourself time to recover, but you can also
Hmm.
get some really good training adaptations from something like that. So it's always a
Yeah.
balance. but I'm definitely not opposed to structuring training, with a more aggressive approach towards those kinds of tune-up races.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, I'm going to jump to our listener questions. So I'll go short ones first. Have 200s become more competitive?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I the Triple Crown record I'm attempting to break was set in 2019, and I I know Mike McKnight, and I think he would agree with me on this. Those races used to be you used to be able to win them and spend time at aid stations, and like
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't call it casual because he was running fast, but
Yeah.
it was more casual.
Yeah.
These races are now run like hundreds. It is 100 without it is 100 plus sleep deprivation is kind of how I think of it. I
Yeah.
mean, my longest aid station stop for Bigfoot was 12 minutes, and
My
my
gosh.
average was 2 or 3 minutes. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
not spending time not moving, and that's the
Yeah.
only reason I won the race actually is aid station stops and efficiency. But yeah, 200s are much more competitive now. And
Wow.
I think they will continue to grow as Cocodona 250, the live stream, these types of events become more and more popular.
Yeah. Wow. How do you battle the lows during the race?
Man, this year I've gotten so lucky. I haven't had any significant lows during these two
Nice.
races, which is just kind of seems like a miracle. I'm like waiting for it to happen. But that being said, it never always gets worse. Is cliche, but it's also kind of a truism. Is that if you're taking care of yourself, you're eating, you're doing what you need to do. You don't have pulmonary edema. You don't have like something that's going to put you in the ICU after you're done. It's going to get better. It's
Yeah.
hard to believe that until you experience it for yourself. And I think that it objectively, physiologically doesn't make that much sense.
Yeah.
But I've had races where the first 50 miles, I feel like garbage. And then at mile 150, I'm running 9-minute miles. Like, I don't understand how that happens. I have no theory of mind or body
Yeah.
about what is going on there, but it's true.
Yeah.
But until you experience it yourself, it's hard to believe that. And so just
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of mantras, thinking about like one exact thing. During some races, I've just thought over and over again the line "I am the task" and trying to separate
Mm.
myself. It's like I'm not my body. I am just this thing. I am the objective. It's like be the ball in basketball, kind of. But yeah. So like having mental strategies like that, having a pacer and a crew can really help.
Hmm.
Having company while you're out there and someone to tell you like get your ass in gear if you start being kind of a whiner
Yeah.
is important. And then yeah, it's just it's kind of a matter of experiencing it yourself and knowing what works.
Hmm.
I do tell my athletes it's like you don't do this because it's easy. You do it
Hmm.
because it's hard. The reason you're out there is to experience the low, and so it's hard
Yeah.
to pull back in that moment and tell yourself that. But if you
Mm.
can and you can be like, oh, like the limit is what I want. I'm not
Hmm.
here because I want to be comfortable. I'm here because I want to be uncomfortable. And so the low is almost your reward. If you
Mm.
can kind of there's so much of this that's mental. And so if you can
Yeah.
shift your mindset into thinking about like this kind of awful suffering as being the positive experience that you've been searching for, like
Mm-hmm.
that's a good way to come out of it and be like, oh yeah, embrace this.
I love that. That's so great. Do you work with a sports psychologist at all?
No.
Do you read read any like self-help books, or where do you get all this good nuggets from? Just experience?
Experience and I mean I'm a big fan of philosophy and I
Yeah.
meditate there's
Hmm.
like some Buddhist kind of stuff
Hmm.
one you can't suffer if there's no one there to suffer, and I kind of believe that
Mm.
what we think of as the self is an illusion. And so
Mm.
there's certain types of um esoteric beliefs that sort of underpin a lot of my philosophy there. But I
Yeah.
mean, I read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius in college for the
Oh, yeah.
first time, and then I
Hmm.
timed a reread of that to coincide with Tahoe. So that was
Nice.
kind of helpful. So I'm a big
Yeah.
fan of the Stoics. I do think that they can be a little bit joyless, but
Mm.
for this specific endeavor, a lot of what
Yeah.
they say, be the rock that the waves crash upon, those types of things.
Hmm.
So no sports psychology, but a lot of what you might call ancient wisdom
Yeah.
that I totally embrace.
Amazing. I love that. Okay, what tools do you use to plot out your own long adventures when it's not associated with a race?
Yeah. So, if I'm just going to be running on trail, I really like the app Trail Run Project.
Mm-hmm.
That I think has the best and easiest interface, and it doesn't have all the trails, but it's good for like showing you to a new area that then you can use
Mm-hmm.
like Gaia to explore. I
Mm-hmm.
think Gaia is probably the best if you have like a GPX track you want to follow or anything. I think that's the
Mm-hmm.
easiest. I'm a big fan of just kind of Googling an area and reading about trip reports, that sort of thing. I
Yeah.
love looking at maps, so
Mm-hmm.
I've got a lot of those Trails Illustrated maps in my
Yeah.
garage. And typically, if I'm going to go explore a new area, I will buy the map for that area. Um, but yeah, I mean, we are so blessed with like the amount of resources that we have. I
Yeah.
always think about people, going to explore remote places back in the day who just had nothing. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, trail run project's my favorite. For I backcountry ski too. I use OnX
Mm-hmm.
Backcountry for backcountry skiing. It's got kind of the best interface for that, and then Gaia for trail running. So there's a whole bunch of kind of GPS tracking options for you out there.
Nice. All right. And we kind of maybe talked a little bit, touched on this, but how do you manage the aid station stops and making them that efficient?
So practice one. I mean, I've got a lot of experience in this now.
Mm-hmm.
Having the right crew. My mom was crewing for me for Tahoe and
Mm-hmm.
Bigfoot, and she is just like an unflappably non-stressed individual and is like perfectly organized. So everything when I get into an aid station is set up the exact same every time. So I know exactly what to expect. I go through with my crew the day or two before, like what to
Mm-hmm.
do at every single aid station that they're going to see me at.
Mm-hmm.
At non-crude aid stations, I don't really use any aid station food. So I have drop bags. I've got my gels that I'm going to take for the next section in a little Ziploc. I've got all of my drinks pre-mixed in Nalgene's that I'm just going to pour into my soft flasks and take with me.
Nice.
So,
Yeah.
you know, the logistical side of these races is semi-complicated and somewhat tedious, but you
Mm-hmm.
can make steps towards being much more efficient at your aid station stops, just
Mm-hmm.
by preparing ahead of time. And I
Yeah.
mentioned it earlier, but I think it is worth focusing on for 1 second. Like at Bigfoot, the guy who came second, his name's Brody. He's only 18, by the way.
Wow.
He's an insane athlete. He's going to be so good. He already is really good.
Yeah.
But his moving time during the race was more than an hour faster than mine. And the only
Whoa.
reason I won is because I stopped for more than 2 hours less than he did. So
Whoa.
it's like aid station efficiency can literally win you races, or it can be the reason that you
Yeah.
make a cutoff or don't make a cutoff.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's wild. And so having that plan and detailing all that out, I imagine that's got to help with race nerves and all of that stuff in preparation to race day.
Definitely. And honestly, after Tahoe, I haven't even really experienced like going into Bigfoot. I had like no nerves. Maybe
Nice.
Moab will have more because there's going to be a little more pressure on this race. There's a lot of
Hmm.
things happening around this, and I've got the chance for
Yeah.
the clean sweep and the triple crown. So maybe I'll have nerves. I don't currently, but
Yeah.
after Tahoe, and I've always had this belief that like I should be competing in these things, even in 2022 when I first towed the line at a 200 and tore my hamstring. So
Oh.
I actually wrote a blog post called Delusional Self Belief. So I've always had this like delusional self belief with no evidence that I should be competing at these things. But after Tahoe, once I knew that I could do this, it's like, okay, like now
Yeah.
I'm just so relaxed going into these now that it feels really good. And I mean, I've just got so much practice with my mom or my wife crewing me that
Hmm.
we've got all of these kind of ritualistic level systems going into it where
Hmm.
it's like we are so prepped and dialed that there's just not
Yeah.
it's it does sort of help with the race nerves, but there's just not a lot of questions around it. It's like
Yeah.
I just have I'm sure that I will face new challenges in the future that will get added to what I prepare
Mhm.
for, but for now I'm
Yeah.
like I have a very good system to control all the variables that can be controlled. And so yeah,
Mhm.
it all feels very natural.
That's great. Yeah, there is that line that you cross when you actually do something, and then in your mind you're like, I can do that.
Yeah.
Like, and yeah, the outlook changes, moving forward. Okay, jumping back to your three statements, your two truths and
Yeah.
a lie. Okay, so I might miss parts of the details, but you had almost fell off a cliff. I think you said in Ireland, which
Yeah.
was a Star Wars filming location.
Yeah.
Do you have a 10-inch scar? when your parents almost ran over you with a tandem bike, and then you tested positive for 55 allergens on a 55 allergen test.
Yeah.
I was thinking that one, or hoping for your sake that one was the lie, but after you sharing some stuff, I'm wondering maybe I got it wrong. So which one was the lie?
So the lie is the almost falling off a cliff on the
Oh,
islands. I did go to those
okay.
islands, and they are a Star Wars filming location. But
Cool.
I didn't almost fall off a cliff, thankfully. But my parents did run me over with a tandem bicycle on accident when I was 11 on July 4th, and I
Oh
did
my
test
gosh.
positive for 55 out of 55 allergens. So yeah, fun
So did
stuff.
you do that allergy test when you were noticing all that inflammation or the joint stuff?
No, I actually did that. So I'm racing the Cocodona 250 again next year, and I've DNF'd
Hmm.
that race 2 years, or actually in 2023 I didn't DNF. I finished the race, but I ended up in the ICU. And then I
Mm.
DNF'd last year with breathing issues that I think are brought on due to allergies. And so
Mm.
I did test positive for 55 out of 55, but I think 18 or 20 of them were like serious enough to address. And so
Whoa.
for the 6 months, so going into that race, I'm going to be taking allergy shots, and for the next
Hmm.
5 years, I'll be taking allergy shots. So, but
Hmm.
hopefully, they take about 6 months to really start to show positive effects if they're working. So hopefully,
Whoa.
I will be a little bit better going into prepared for some of the specific Arizona plant life that wants to kill me. Going into
Interesting.
Cocodona.
Yeah. So it was full plant testing, not food specific allergies.
Yeah, it was mostly plant. I also am allergic to pineapple, so they tested pineapple and just confirmed that.
Oh,
So that was
yeah.
also that.
Gosh, wow. Yeah, that is, yeah, it certainly would make a difference on someone if they have, yeah, pollen allergies and they're going to race,
Hmm.
like you're saying. And yeah, wow, wild. Oh man. Well, I hope that works out, the allergy shots, and
Yeah, me too.
gets that all figured out. And so you said next thing on the radar for you is Moab.
Yeah, Moab 240.
All right.
Yeah,
So
October
gonna be
10th.
October 10th. We will be, so do they live stream that? Are they gonna
No,
start?
unfortunately. So the Triple Crown is put on by Destination Trail, who doesn't
Hmm.
hasn't quite entered the live stream game as effectively as
Hmm.
Cocodona and Aravaipa.
Yeah.
So, but there's live tracking, and there'll be
Hmm.
portions of it that are on a live stream, but not the whole race.
Great.
There will be a little documentary that's coming out about me and the Triple Crown this year. So that'll be focused on
Awesome.
Moab. So there will be I will have some videographers out there filming with me and stuff like that.
Sweet.
So that'll be something to hopefully look forward to. Hopefully the story has a happy ending.
Yeah, awesome.
But yeah, really excited. I feel incredibly motivated now that I have kind of the opportunity to get the first clean sweep in the Triple
Yeah,
Crown since 2019 and break the overall Triple Crown record. So yeah, a
amazing.
few
Wow.
things within reach that are really exciting.
So cool, so cool. Really fascinating. And like I said, the diet stuff too, I think is just so fascinating and I think great for people to hear and again, see what's working for people that's it's a little different, right? Than
Yeah.
what's being pushed from the science and all that. So I think that's super great for our listeners. Where can people find you and follow you?
Sure. So my Instagram is at Run Tough Mindset, and then just all one word spelled exactly the way it sounds. And then I have a Substack that I write about running, and where you can find like race reports, and I do a really detailed Tahoe breakdown of my fueling, which was the same for Bigfoot. So
Awesome.
I didn't do one for Bigfoot, but that is
Love that.
also a Substack at Run Tough Mindset. So same across both platforms.
Perfect. Well, we will link those in the show notes for the listeners. And this has been, like I said, so fascinating. I loved every minute of this episode. So thank you so much for your time, Kilian.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. This is really fun. I was excited when you sent me the outline of some possible topics. So it like exceeded expectations. This is really interesting.
Oh,
So yeah,
yeah.
thank you. I appreciate
Yeah.
it.
This has been awesome.